Hello everyone. In the continuation of the series of Principles of Agronomy by Reddy and Reddy, today we will be covering the chapter number 5. We have already covered half of its chapter and we'll be covering the further leftover topics today. In the continuation, if you haven't watched that earlier video of part 1, that is soil environment and its chemistry, soil environment and its modification, then you must watch it, and after that it will be easier for you to understand the second part. Alright, so we'll begin with the non-silicate clay minerals. Before beginning this video, I would like to slightly discuss about the mock test that we have prepared. The team Agrovisor has prepared a mock test. Basically it consists of 3 mock tests and it costs just rupees 60. See, 60 is a very nominal amount, and basically it is based on the latest pattern of the ICR that is being followed. That is, there are certain statement based questions are there, assessment and reason based questions will be there, and the report and the ranks would be sent personally to your emails if you register it. If you want the further details, you can check the description box. I'll be giving a link of the Google Forms, and you can, if you want, you can avail that, and you can also check about what are the features of it. So let's begin with the non-silicate clay minerals. Before beginning with non-silicate clay minerals, let's slightly brief about the silicate clay minerals that we have discussed in the earlier video. Therefore, I'm requesting first of all go and watch the first part of this, that is first part of the chapter, that is soil environment and its classification. I'll be giving a link in the iCard section also. So basically silicate crystals are those that consist of a silica layer, and they are basically of 3 types, that is 1:1 type, then 2:1 type, and again 2:2 type. So basically there are 3 types of silicate crystal minerals. 1:1 type we have kaolinite, in 2:1 we have montmorillonite, in case of 2:2 type we have chlorite. So basically there is a certain examples of silicate crystal minerals. So let's continue with the non-silicate clay minerals. The important part is that the non-silicate clay minerals are basically the hydrous oxides of iron and aluminium. This is important part. You remember that these are the hydrous oxides of iron and aluminium. The important part is this: the minerals, that is non-silicate clay minerals. Example, that is first of all is goethite, the other is gibbsite. These two examples are very important, especially the formulas is also very important, like Fe2O3.H2O is what? Goethite, and Al2O3.3H2O is gibbsite. Just remember that gibbsite is a alumina hydrous oxide, while goethite is a iron oxide. Alright, after that, the other important thing is that most of the hydrous oxide are non-sticky and lesser in plasticity and cohesiveness than silicate clay minerals. Means uh, the clay content, basically the properties related to the clay or the finer fraction of the soils are less, like plasticity, cohesiveness, stickiness, all these are related to the finer fractions, and the non-silicate clay minerals are basically the coarser section of the soils, constituted of coarser section. See, one term is there, the plasticity. Plasticity means the ability of the soil so that whenever pressure is being applied, it does not form certain cracks. So basically this is plasticity. It is measured in terms of plasticity index, and it is measured by Atterberg apparatus. That is a different thing. Just remember that plasticity is measured by in terms of plasticity index. Alright, after that we have olefins. See, these are also very important. Olefins are amorphous mineral matter. Amorphous means they do not have a certain crystalline structure, that they do not have a certain uniform composition. Alright, and basically olefins consist of silica and sesquio oxides, and the important part is their formula, that is Al2O3.2SiO2.H2. it is generally a generalized composition of a olefin. Alright, after that organic soil colloids, that is humus. This is not important. This is important, but it would be further detailed. We will have a detail about humus in this chapter only, in after this topic. All right, and let's leave this. Let's talk about cation exchange capacity. See, cation exchange capacity is a very important property of the soil. Alright, it is also mentioned in this also. It is very important property of the soil. It is important in terms that the nutrient availability of the soil is basically determined by the cation exchange capacity. Alright, means higher the cation exchange capacity, better will be the nutrient availability of the soil. Alright, so what exactly is the cation exchange capacity? We need to understand. See, uh, there are certain micelles that the clay forms, and the negative charge on the clay micelle is due to isomorphic substitution. Isomorphic means iso means similar, morpho means morphology, means certain cations that are similar in their ionic radius, they substitute one another, and because of this a negative charge is being developed on the clay micelles. All right, so basically this is the reason for the development of negative charge on clay micelles. So just remember that clay minerals or clay micelles have a negative charge. The reason is because of isomorphic substitution. All right, now because of this negative charge, see, the cations that are present in soil, they are absorbed on the surface. See, adsorbed, not absorbed, adsorbed on the surface of the micelle. Now see, the important part in this adsorption is that the divalent cations, basically calcium and magnesium, these are all divalent cations. These are absorbed more strongly than the monovalent cations. Monovalent cations means sodium, potassium, they are absorbed to a lesser extent. So when they are absorbed, it is a kinds of interface that is developed, means negative charge of this clay micelle attracts the uh, cations towards it. Now when the cations are attracted towards it, means for example this is a clay micelle and these are the certain cations, divalent or monovalent, both cations are there. So when they interact with this micelle, what is there, there is an exchange of cations that takes place. All right, and this exchange is basically known as cation exchange, and the ability of a soil to exchange these cations to a certain extent, and means to what extent can a soil exchange these cations, is known as the cation exchange capacity of the soil. All right, so uh, this quantity of cations that is present is expressed in terms of milliequivalents. See, what is equivalent? For example, if you talk of hydrogen, the equivalent weight of hydrogen is the atomic weight, sorry, the molecular weight of hydrogen, that is 1 divided by the charge that it carries, it is also 1. You can understand better in terms of calcium. See, calcium has a uh, atomic weight of about 40, and the charge that it carries is 2, so the equivalent weight of calcium is 20. All right, so the quantity of cations that are present in the soil is expressed in terms of milliequivalents. This is the important part that one must remember, and this is what being given how milliequivalent weight is being calculated. This is not important. It is important, but I have already discussed about it. The other important aspect related to the cation exchange capacity is the base saturation. Alright, the base saturation means the percentage of bases in the total cations except hydrogen present on the exchangeable complex. See, what does it means that you understand through this this diagram that is being given. Alright, see the percentage of bases. See, bases are what? Calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. Basically, these are bases. All right, hydrogen is not a base, but it is acidic in nature, so we do not count hydrogen in percentage base saturation calculation. So basically, there are four cations, not types, but there are four cations that are calculated or determined in terms of percentage base saturation determination. These are calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. All right, see, if this is the soil surface, all right, and uh, this soil has certain amount of calcium present in it, a certain amount of magnesium that is present in it, and certain amount of potassium that is being present, and also some amount of sodium that is being present. All right, this is an ideal condition that constitute of all the cations, but for example, if you talk, let's consider an example. This is a soil surface that constitute of potassium and calcium. All right, out of the total bases, that is sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, only two are present on its surface. All right, so basically this is the base saturation, means out of the total cations, that is calcium, magnesium, sodium, and this, how much amount is present at the exchangeable surface, it is known as base saturation. All right, if you understand through an example that the CEC of the soil is 20 milliequivalents. Alright, yes, what other important thing I'd like to discuss is that base saturation is that the amount of milliequivalents of cations that are being present, that is milliequivalents of calcium, magnesium, potassium and sodium that are present in soil divided by the CEC of the soil is basically known as the base saturation. Alright, you can understand better through an example that is being given over here. For example, the CEC of soil is 20 milliequivalents, that is in the denominator we will get 20, and the CEC of calcium, magnesium, potassium and sodium means the addition of all these CECs, that is CEC of calcium plus CEC of magnesium plus CEC of potassium and sodium have a combined value of 15. Alright, so you'll get 15 in numerator and the value we'll get is 0.75. Alright, when in terms of percentage it would be 75%. So the percentage base saturation is 75%. Alright, the important part you remember with base saturation and CEC is that as the availability of this nutrient increases, the base saturation also increases. Alright, now also remember that CEC is the principal buffering mechanism that is present in the soil. Just remember that CEC is the principal buffering mechanism that is present in the soil. We'll be discussing about the buffering mechanism just after this. Now the cation exchange capacity of certain soil particles and creme minerals have been given in this table, and the important thing that you remember is that just remember that smectite has a higher CEC, that is 70 centimole per kilogram compared to the other minerals. Also remember that more finer is the section of the soil, means more finer is the soil, that is if you see the trend, clay has higher CEC than loam, then silt, then sand, means coarser the fraction, lesser will be the CEC, and finer the fraction, more will be the CEC. If you see over here, fine sand has CEC of about 100 milliequivalent per 1 milliequivalent per 100 gram, and see also remember the unit of CEC, that is milliequivalents per 100 gram. This is very important. Sometimes it is asked also that what is the unit of certain, like for example of base saturation there is no unit, it is unitless as it is expressed in terms of percentage. In CEC the unit is milliequivalents per 100 gram. So for finer sand it has 1, for loam it is 9.1. This table is very important, you need to remember each and every value that is being given over here. Alright, so this is the basically the clay minerals that are being for kaolinite, illite, montmorillonite, vermiculite, humus. This is very important table, this as well as this. If you cannot remember this part then no problem, but do not skip these clay minerals because these are more important. Alright, now similar to the cation exchange capacity is the anion exchange. See, when at the surface of the soil or at the exchange surface, when anions are being exchanged, alright, for example chloride is there, sulfate is there, these are being exchanged. So how easily they are being exchanged with the total amount of anions that are being present is known as anion exchange capacity. Means out of the total anions that are being present, CEC of the soil in denominator divided by the anion of CEC of various anions that are being present. Alright, this is just reverse of cation exchange capacity. Basically CEC is of greater importance in terms of soil fertility and various other physical parameters compared to anion exchange capacity. Now humus. See, humus refers to an organic matter that is resistant to further breakdown. Alright, it is the finally decomposed matter that is present, it is resistant to any further breakdown. This is very important that humus cannot be broken down into further simpler constituents. Alright, now the important part is in this that during the decomposition of humus there are certain not chemicals, there are certain acids that are being produced. These are humin is being produced, then humic acid is being produced, and the other is fulvic acid. Alright, these three acids are being produced. See, in case of humin, you remember certain points, that first of all in terms of molecular weight. Alright, so if you see the molecular weight, the humin has the highest molecular weight, and the fulvic acid has the lowest molecular weight. Alright, and in terms of solubility, human is not soluble in any of the substance, means not in alkali or not in any acid. It is not soluble in any part. Alright, while humic acid, it is partly soluble in alkaline solution. Alright, and in case of fulvic acid, it is universally soluble in everything. This is very important. The other important thing is that humus is soluble in water. Alright, humus is soluble in water. This is very important. It can be asked in the statement form that whether humus is soluble or not soluble or not. It would be asked that humus is soluble in water. So statement 1, whether statement 1 is true or false, and like this kind of questions can be asked as the latest trend. Now after that, organic matter. See, this is very important, that the organic matter part, the important part is that the typical soil has a biomass composition of 70% microorganism, 20% 22% macrofauna and 8% roots. What does it means? That if out of 100 gram of soil, if you take a random sample of 100 gram of soil near the plants, you will see a typical biomass in which 70% would be the microorganisms. All right, it would be microbes. 22% would be the macrofauna. That means it can be termites, it can be nematodes, it can be earthworms, or it can be anything. All right, and 8% would be roots. Means out of 100 gram, 70 gram would be microorganism, 22 grams would be these termites, nematodes and etc., while 8 grams would be of the root. This is very important in terms of percentage, you remember, and these are very important. After that, this all you can skip, this is not important. Just remember that O horizon is known as the organic horizon, while A horizon is known as topsoil. Alright, this already we have discussed also. Next you can skip all this, this is not important. Now buffering capacity. What does buffering capacity mean? Simply, buffering capacity is the ability of the soil, or the inherent property of the soil, to resist any change in the pH. See, when you talk of pH, see, buffering capacity is not specifically related to pH, it is a general property. Means buffering capacity simply means that it would resist any change, either it would be in pH, either it would be any other property of the soil, but it would be generalized as buffering capacity. Alright, if you talk of pH, then we'll be saying that the buffering capacity of soil in terms of pH. Alright, so when talking about the buffering capacity of soil in terms of pH, the pure sand has almost no buffering ability. Means higher the coarser fraction of the soil, mean more the coarse fraction of the soil, lesser will be its buffering ability. Means either application through any of the fertilizer or acidic substance, the pH of the soil can be fluctuated very easily. Alright, same is the case with bases also, that either you apply any base, there will be great fluctuation in the pH, while in case of pure sand, the buffering capability is very low, and highest in the case of clay or manured soil. Now the degree of buffering is limited by the CEC of the soil. This is a very important part, and also remember that CEC is the uh, principal buffering mechanism that is present in the soil, and the CEC of the soil greatly influence the buffering ability of the soil. Now soil solution, this is just a generalized term, you can skip this part. Other thing important, that when, see, we know that whenever there is an exchange of cations or anions, there roots of the plant that absorb these, or where the exchange take place, when plant absorbs a cation, it releases hydrogen ion, and when a plant exchanges an anion, it exchanges with the soil an ion. Means what I mean to say is that if whenever a plant will exchange for a cation, then it will release hydrogen ion, and whenever it will exchange for an anion, it will release hydroxyl ion in the soil, so as a charge is being balanced. Alright, this you remember. After that, nutrient, see, this is, everyone knows that nitrogen is obtained by plants from organic matter. This is very basic statement. Alright, so do not confuse that if a question is being asked like in soil the majority of the nitrogen is obtained by plant, is derived from, say, options would be given like fertilizer or organic matter, or or any other example would be given, the answer would be organic matter. Do not mark a fertilizer in it. Alright, So these are the sources of various plant nutrient. Do not skip any part from this nutrient part, or the I must not say nutrient. This is basically the minerals in which the nutrients are being present. Like for example, apatite is a source of what? Phosphorus mineral, and mica mineral is an example source of potassium, and dolomite, calcite, apatite, calcium carbonate. These are all minerals that are a source of calcium. So likewise, there are certain examples that are being given. You remember each and every one, because these are frequently asked in SRF as well as JRF examination, or any other examination you will give. You will see questions from this, either in the match the following or from direct questions. All right. Now nitrogen transformation, this is very important, that how does nitrogen that is being applied or present in the soil is transformed. Either it would be mineralized or it would be immobilized. It depends upon the conditions that are being prevailing. All right. The important statement is that the optimum soil moisture for mineralization is 50 to 70% of the water holding capacity of soil. This is very important statement. Also remember that for nitrification also, the moisture content is about 70 to 75% of the available soil moisture. This moisture is being required, and the pH is about 8.5. This is the optimum conditions for nitrification of nitrogen. Alright, after this is the fate of ammonia, that is so no, not ammonia, of urea after its application. Basically this deals with the fate of ammonia, sorry, not ammonia, urea. See, immediately after application of urea, it is hydrolyzed in the presence of urease and forms ammonium carbonate. You can better understand with this formula that is being given. See, this is urea. As it combines or it comes in contact with the moisture that is being present in the soil, the urease enzyme present, it not activates, it acts upon the urea, and it's transform urea into ammonium carbonate. And this ammonium carbonate is an unstable compound, and this ammonium carbonate further forms, decomposes and further forms ammonia and carbon dioxide. All right. In this process, hydrogen ion is also being released. So remember that after application of urea, the pH of the soil decreases. This is important statement. All right, these are certain database that is being given that, and this percent losses will occur because of volatilization. You don't remember this because this is very confusing, that how much percentage of this is being lost as volatilization, because in further, if we'll go through this text, you will come that there are certain other citations also given that this percentage loss will occur, this percentage will occur. So skip this part. Just remember that how the unstable compound, that is ammonium carbonate, and the pH will decrease, and it is hydrolyzed in the presence of urease, the enzyme. Only this is important. After that, the volatilization part. All right. See, volatilization is a very what I must say is a important process in terms of nitrogen that is being lost in the soil. See, the increase in pH initiates the volatilization loss. This is very important. Means for volatilization losses to occur, the soil pH must be of higher, must be higher. Alright, it must be more than 7 for the volatilization to losses to occur. Mainly 8.5 pH or about 9 pH is very suitable for the volatilization process. Alright, so volatilization of process is basically what, in see, ammonia that is being present, either it would be through urea or any other ammonical fertilizer. When it is applied, it combines with water and it forms ammonia. Alright, this is basically a volatilization simply process. Alright, and ammonium ion finally converts into gaseous ammonia. Alright, this is volatilization. Now actually how it occurs is that this ammonium ion, which may be present in the either might have came from the ammonical fertilizer or from urea or any other organic matter or any other part. Alright, whenever it combines with the hydroxyl ion that is being present, alright, this hydroxyl ion, what it does is it creates an what it does is it combines with it, reacts with it, and forms ammonia, that is gaseous ammonia, and this is escaped in the atmosphere, and this hydrogen ion is being produced. Now when this hydroxyl ion combines with ammonia, what this happens is that the pH of the soil decreases, because of this hydroxyl ion a basic pH is being maintained, and when it combines with this ammonia, it basically leads to decrease of the pH. So remember that after the volatilization losses occur, the pH of the soil decreases, means it becomes acidic. Alright, now this is not that what I was saying. See, the leaching losses with the urea are around 7.5% applied to nitrogen. Again, you will see that volatilization losses range from 0.1 to 20%. See, don't remember these stats because these are very confusing. Again, this is given that the leaching losses are higher with ammonium nitrate and is lowest with urea. Don't remember this part. The important thing is that the amount of nitrogen that is fixed ranges from 4 to 54% of the total nitrogen content. This is one of the questions that has been asked in 2016 GRF examination, that out of the total nitrogen content that is present in soil, how much amount is fixed, means range was being asked. Alright, this is important. After that, phosphorus transformation. See, phosphorus basically in soil, inorganic form of phosphorus is more prevalent than the organic form of phosphorus. Alright, also remember that the availability of phosphorus is greater towards the basically neutral pH or slightly acidic pH. Alright, and in case of vertisalts, basically under alkaline conditions, the dominant form of phosphorus is calcium phosphate, while in case of LP salts it is basically present as iron phosphates. Alright, and in India soils basically they are alkaline, so calcium phosphate is most dominant form and constitute about 40 to 50% of the total phosphorus that is being present. Alright, and what important part that you need to remember in case of phosphorus transformation is that uh, the this H2PO4 negative, HPO4 negative and H2PO4 negative. See the sequence of their availability. See, highest amount of availability will be present in H2PO4 negative. Alright, means this is the highest, most of the phosphorus that is available to plants is in this form. After that it is HPO4 2 negative. Alright, this is the next available form, and the least available form is PO4 2 negative. This is the least available form of phosphorus to soil. This is the sequence. This is, you must remember, this is very important. Alright, after that this is not important, you can skip this part. And the important thing is that the acidic soils that are present, so basically acidic soils, there is a more fixation of phosphate than compared to neutral alkaline and calcareous soil. This is very important statement because it is very because if you haven't gone through it very thoroughly, you will get a wrong answer in this, because generally it is believed that fixation is greater in alkaline conditions. So remember that acidic soils fix more phosphate than neutral and alkaline and calcareous soils. Alright, now other important thing is that within the pH range of 4.5 to 7.5 means under acidic condition phosphate is fixed on clay particles. Alright, and when it is greater than 7.5, it is just precipitated or absorbed. Alright, by forming either it can form primary orthophosphates or it will form clay phosphate linkage. This is the two important things. This is not important, you can skip this part. And this is also not important. The important part is this, that the solubility of phosphorus that is present in leach's form. This is a form of phosphorus, means kind of fertilizer you can say. This when it's present leachate of different soil, it is average to 1.4 to 1.4 milligram per liter, 1.4 ppm. Alright, the other important thing is that the solubility of phosphorus in runoff water from high soil is 0.11 milligram per liter. Means just remember the solubility of phosphorus present in leachates is what, 1.4, and solubility of phosphorus present in runoff water is 0.11. After that you can skip this part, this is not important. This is also not important. Just remember that phosphorus demand of wheat is highest in which stage, in the early growth stage. Alright, this data you need to not to remember that 1.67. This is also not important, you can skip this part. Again this is not important, this is also not important, this is not important, you can skip this also. From here it is important. See, these are very important statements and very confusing also. See, first statement is that wheat is most sensitive to the absence of fertilizer. Students, remember these sentences as such. See, wheat is most sensitive to absence of phosphorus fertilizer. Alright, statement number 1. Statement number 2 is that sunflower is less sensitive to the absence of phosphorus fertilizer. Alright, first is what wheat is most sensitive, and second is that sunflower is the least sensitive to what absence of phosphatic fertilizer. Right, other third important thing is that the sensitive index, phosphorus sensitive index, it is basically the green yield with no phosphorus means controlled conditions, and the green yield with maximum phosphorus. All right, and the phosphorus sensitive value index for certain crops is being given. For wheat it is 0.72, for sorghum it is 0.77, for sunflower it is 0.83. Remember these exact as such. All right, and the other important thing that is being given over here is that the soil critical p values are lowest for maize and highest for sunflower, while wheat, soybean and sorghum are intermediate. See, three things what are very confusing. First, wheat is most sensitive in the absence of fertilizer. First, second, sunflower is less sensitive in the absence of phosphoric fertilizer. Third, the critical soil P values are lowest for maize and highest for sunflower, while wheat is intermediate. See, these three statements are very confusing. You remember them as word by word. Alright, and the phosphorus sensitive index also, it is very important. Even it has been asked in the SRF examination also once, that what is the phosphorus sensitive index for sorghum. Right, so remember this part. After that, the Olson's method. See, basically determination of phosphorus in it can be done by two methods, either Olson's method or it can be done by Bray's method. In India, basically Olson's method is being used because majority of the soil in India is alkaline, so Olson's method is being used. Bray's method is used under acidic condition. Alright, after that, mineralization of phosphorus is more influenced by soil moisture. This is a very basic thing. After that, this is not important, this is also not important. Now, potassium transformation. See, potassium may be present either in the form of fixed potassium, exchangeable and water soluble, and all these forms are present in equilibrium in soil. Alright, after that, this is the formula of feldspar that is being given, that is KAlSi3O8. This is very important, you remember this formula. Whether this is not important and this is also not important. The important thing is that the highest amount of potassium that is fixed, it was noticed in case of black soil, that is vertisols, and the lowest in terms of red soil. Also in terms of minerals, you remember that highest amount of phosphorus is being fixed by, sorry, potassium is being fixed by the montmorillonite types of clay mineral. Alright, this is very important. So students, today we will be covering only this much. After rest parts we will be covering in the next video. Right, thank you.